Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to ask everyone if you have any electronic devices to please turn them off or put them on silent during the meeting, please. Before we begin, I'm going to call the meeting to order. It is 6:02 p.m. Would everyone please rise and join me in the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Members of the board, I'm going to entertain a motion to confirm the next meeting date of April 6, 2020 at Old Town Hall at 1111 Somerset Avenue in Dayton.
So moved.
Motion
Second.
made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, let's vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? That motion carries. Gentlemen of the board, I'm going to entertain a motion that we adjourn tonight's meeting at 9 p.m.
So moved.
Motion
Second.
made and seconded. Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, let's vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? That motion carries. Thank you. We move on to agenda item number 4, and that's 4B, public hearing continued for Forest Hills Estates Special Permit Conservation Subdivision, map 3, lot 28 and 33 and 78. I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Glass.
Good evening, members. I want to thank you for your time this evening, and thank you for your understanding through everybody's continuances over the last few months. I appreciate that. Won't go too far back over the history, given our original presentation. I'm going to ask Outback Engineering, after a few remarks, to give you a summary of the revisions to the plan since the last time we were before you. On our end of things, by way of update, we have appeared before the Dayton Conservation Commission, the Taunton Conservation Commission, Dayton Sewer, the North Dayton Fire District, the Stormwater Subcommittee informally, and the Fire Department. Within each of those, the Dayton Conservation Commission currently has before a notice of intent. Their peer review engineer beta group is in the process of completing their comments. We anticipate having those in the next 2 weeks. Taunton Conservation Commission, who only has a limited interest in this matter in the form of Basin 8, has elected to utilize the same peer review engineer as the Dayton Conservation Commission, so for lack of a better term, they're following Dayton's lead. They're waiting to see what beta produces and where the Dayton Conservation Commission comes down, at least initially, but have generally kept them abreast as to progress. Dayton Sewer has engaged Russ Cleeclamp of GHD, who has reviewed the plan and has limited comments and provided those to the Sewer Commission, essentially related to additional borings in the areas where the sewer pipes go down below 10 feet. No other substantive comments beyond that. The North Dayton Fire District, who I believe has some representatives here this evening, we've met with them a few times as well. Their review engineer, Amory Engineering, has provided some comments that were incorporated into the design before you today, as well as the responses that were provided to Green International. There are a couple of jurisdictional issues as well as engineering issues that we're still working through with them, but we'll continue to do so. The Stormwater Subcommittee we met with informally, received some feedback from the agent, Mr. Pilling, primarily related to concerns and issues, questions related to groundwater, something that was actually raised also by sewer. And the fire department, who we reached out to and sort of had some back and forth, has just been somewhat busy, but engaged with the engineers regarding some of the turnaround radius and access points. And we will continue to follow up with them and try to find time to sit down and just generally get their direct comments. I know we provided comments previously. At this time, we are awaiting, as you're likely aware, the peer review comments of Green International. So don't have a whole lot more to add to what we submitted previously. We had tried to assemble a fairly comprehensive response. There's a lot there. And the last piece, since we were last before you, we have engaged Ed Brennan and Dan DeBreo at Brennan Recupero to help us with this process. You know, given the existence of the court order, we want to make sure we're following that to a T, doing all the things we need to do. Ask them to help look over my shoulder and our shoulder and make sure we're all doing this right. And with that brief summary, I was going to ask Jason Youngquist of Outback Engineering to provide you a summary of what we've done so far, or since we were last before you.
Thank you, Mr. Glass. Mr. Youngquist, if you please identify yourself with your name and your affiliation, please.
Yes, I'm Jason Youngquist from Outback Engineering. We are the civil engineers for this project and surveyors. As you may recall, this is a 161-acre site located off 4th Street. It's right along the town of Dayton and city of Taunton. Town line runs along the edge of the property. It's a wooded piece of property with wetlands on both edges. There's on the east and west sides, there's a ridge that runs through the middle of the property, and it pitches towards both the wetland areas. Proposed as a conservation subdivision that's before the board. It has dedicated open space in the back, back by the wetlands in the back. There's dedicated open space all throughout the whole property. So it's 161 acres, and it has 41 acres approximately of open space, which includes the back and open areas in the middle. That was all part of the settlement agreement, the layout, to make sure that there was green areas along the perimeter of the development, as well as through the actual development. As you may recall, there's 8 drainage basins spread throughout the development. These are infiltration basins, so stormwater that we collected on the roadways, through standard catch basins, manholes, piped to the basins where they be treated with either water quality tanks or sediment forebays before any stormwater is released into the infiltration basins. There would be, if you had a storm, the water would sit there for a little bit while it's slowly released back on its way to the wetlands, and some of it would be infiltrated back to the groundwater. As these are infiltration basins, they will be drained within 48 hours of a 100-year storm event. So they don't hold water, they're not sitting there watering them all the time, mosquito breeding grounds. I know that's always a concern. Stormwater management policy from the state requires you to have them drained in 72 hours. Ours drain quicker than that. So, also all the house lots have roof drain infiltrators, so low impact development design, keeping that stormwater in not all in one spot, kind of spreading it out so you recharge it to the whole groundwater instead of just isolated areas. We've gone through extensive drainage analysis, pre-development as it exists now, where water's flowing, how much water's getting recharged to the groundwater versus our post-development analysis. You can't increase your flow to the wetlands or anything, so you have to analyze pre and post to make sure you're matching pre-existing conditions so you don't impact any abutters. As Mr. Glass mentioned, this has been through extensive review from Green International affiliates, and they've reviewed it. And the plans you have before you is that first set of revisions from their comments checklist that they had. So we went through that, and a number of changes were done based on their comments. Typical, it's a large subdivision, a lot of typos here and there, but they also had some substantive comments. One of the biggest ones was how much rainfall to analyze for the 100-year storm event. We've done 7-inch storm for 100 years, but the new charts that are coming out, they want you to do a little over 8.5 inches. So we reanalyze it for an 8.5-inch 24-hour rainstorm for a 100-year storm event, which is quite a bit more rain. So we had to make some modifications to the drainage basins and the whole drainage system to make sure we weren't impacting any abutters that I mentioned before. You can't increase your off-site flow and impact any abutters if you're going from pre-existing to post-construction conditions. So that set of revisions was sent to Green. They're in the process of reviewing those again. In the meantime, it was also sent to Beta Engineering for conservation, and they're in the process of reviewing subdivision plans as well. So taking the drainage, they're reviewing kind of the same things that Green is reviewing, the drainage, how we analyze the drainage to make sure they agree with what we're doing, make sure we're all on the same page. So it's an important part to make sure we're not impacting the butters with the amount of rain, with rain, runoff, make sure it's all treated and sent to wetlands or into the ground without impacting the butters. So that was the big change on the plans. Just kind of reworking the whole drainage system and drainage report based on that higher rainfall. But that all worked out and has been sent to them, so hopefully we'll be getting their comments back shortly. They had also commented on reworking some of the grades for the roadways. Didn't want any more than 5 feet of fill in certain areas. As you know, it's quite a big pitch to that, so we're trying to match grades as best we can. As we came off those hills, we ended up with a little more fill than what the review engineer felt comfortable with, so we had to rework some of those slopes to make sure that we were making a safe roadway conditions once it's all constructed. Fire department had some comments and questions and concerns about turning radii, making sure their apparatus could fit on all the roads and make the turns. So we went through, got the size of their trucks, their ladder trucks, to make sure that would all work out. We had analyzed, we have a turning radii program we put in the computer to make sure we wouldn't have any issues with fire apparatus getting through the subdivision. In addition, the North Dayton Fire District, we are going through some changes for them, a few minor details on construction on the detail sheets. There's insufficient pressure on the water line on Forest Street, so we're going through the best way to address that with their consultant. Sewer, we met with them a number of times. Did a couple minor revisions to details and notes in relation to how the sewer line will be constructed and inspected. From what we've discussed with them, it seems capacity is not an issue. So we're going through and revising the plans to make any corrections to any details that they wanted. They did want to make sure, because there's a couple deep cuts, that there was no ledge to be encountered. We haven't found any in any of the holes we've dug, so we will be going out to dig additional holes in some of the deeper areas to make sure there's no ledge. We'll either dig holes or we'll do soil borings to make sure ledge would not be an issue once construction starts. It's, better to have all those things up front once you get started, before you get started. The Stormwater Committee, Mr. Pilling had a couple pages in a letter for some comments. Big one is he wanted to get out, we've already dug holes in the drainage basins and throughout the subdivision. He would like to get out and also see some additional holes dug to confirm water table, make sure we're all on the same page analyzing that. So that's in the works. We have to stake out the roadway for them so we know where everybody's walking when they go out on site. That's in process at the moment. So once that's done, we'll be getting out with them, the consultant beta engineering. The sewer department's consultant as well. We'll get out and dig some more holes, check water table, check the ledge, and just confirm some of the design parameters are correct throughout the subdivision and the drainage calculations. A couple other revisions to the drainage system, additional water quality treatments before stormwater runoff gets to the infiltration basins were added. A couple details to the roads that were adjusted, pavement thicknesses and things like that. And then also making sure that the basins were constructed properly. Because they are infiltration basins, you have to take great care in the construction so they don't get clogged up. If they don't get clogged up during construction, they won't work properly once they are active, catching all the runoff from the roadways. I'm sure Stormwater Committee is well aware of those issues. I think when we met with you, there was somebody on before us that seemed to have that issue with their drainage system being plugged up during construction. Now the basin wasn't functioning correctly. So we have we did a number of changes. And we also have quite a few pages of erosion sediment control plans in the subdivision set to make sure during construction, when the subdivision is most critical, if you're getting rainstorms and we have all the loose dirt and everything, that anything that happens then will be controlled on site wouldn't impact any of the neighbors or the wetlands. That's kind of a very important piece of the whole process, is to make sure nothing's going to be impacted when it's done, but also during the construction process. In the past, they always made you check in and make sure it's going to be the same afterwards, but they didn't really care about the construction process, and that's when wetlands were getting impacted, neighbors were getting impacted. So now the whole design process is almost based around the construction process to make sure nobody's impacted during that time when it's most vulnerable to rain. So that's about the extent of our revisions. He had a number of comments, but it's kind of a general overview of what we were doing in the process. So I don't know if you guys had anything to add? Or if you had any questions?
No, I do not, Mr. Youngwood, so I'd just like to remind you that any plan revisions, we make sure that all the appropriate authorities have these.
Yes.
We want to continue to keep these for the record.
Yep.
Because it runs in many situations where a revised set of plans never comes to in front of us, and everyone is under the impression that a revised set of plans has been voted on.
Right.
So we just want to make sure that.
I think we had discussed that the other day at the Stormwater Committee, how important it is to make sure, and especially with so many people involved, that everybody's getting the revised plans as things are updated. Mr. Glass and I will definitely make sure that that's taken care of.
We're still marching towards February 2nd. That's the last revision, stamped plans.
Yes.
Okay. Thank
So we're in the process of gathering in everybody's comments to kind of analyze it. Well, there's so many different review engineers, kind of want to take everything together, make our revisions. Sometimes when you have multiple review engineers, one would want to analyze it such a way where it kind of conflicts with somebody else's opinion, so then we have to get in touch with them and we have to figure out why they both think should be a different way and come up with something that's best for everybody involved.
Members of the board, any questions?
I had a list of detailed questions, but I don't know if those ever got passed. We could do electronically. I mean, there were questions about drawing comments. I don't know if that ever made it to whoever.
You could always send those in as we're making our revisions. We can always incorporate those as well.
Okay, I can do that. That's all right. I can send them again. I wanted to make sure I had the right revision, so it's stamped.
Yep.
2/1/22.
Yep, that's the one revision that's on there.
All right, I'll pass those along.
Anyone else from the applicants would like to say something this evening?
No.
Mr. Youngwood, thank you very much. At this time, I'm going to read some documentation into the record. Entitled Dayton Board of Health, Stormwater Committee, 1111 Somerset Avenue, Dayton, Massachusetts, dated February 8th of 2022. This is Forest Hills review of the proposed subdivision plan. This office has completed a review of the subdivision plan dated December 21st, 2022, revised January 28, 2022. The plan has been reviewed for compliance with the Dayton Stormwater Regulations and the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection Stormwater Guidelines. Infiltration basin number 8 is located in Taunton, but its discharge is directed toward a wetland system which is in Taunton and Dayton. Therefore, some of the comments made in this letter are applicable to basin number 8. We offer the following comments. Excuse me. The location of Sunken Brook differs from the Mass GIS Bureau of Geographic Information location by over 100 feet westerly and over 200 feet southerly. How was the location of the brook determined? Has the location been confirmed by the Conservation Commission? The amount of disturbance for this project exceeds 35,000 square feet. A stormwater permit issued by the Board of Health is required. The water table on the site is fairly shallow. The USDA soils mapping for the area indicate water table depths of 18 to 37 inches below grade. There appear to have been 35 test pits done on the site in the vicinity of the infiltration basins. Estimated seasonal high groundwater in these test pits vary from 30 inches to 76 inches below grade, with 11 holes having no water table at all. excuse me, given the soils mapping as indicated above, these basins and swale may be in the water table. We are requesting that test pits be excavated in the presence of the health agent at the location of the proposed infiltration basins. These holes must be performed prior to final design of the basins. There are several instances where the depth to the water table may be problematic. There are roof infiltration systems proposed for all buildings. The bottom of the stone below these units will be approximately 3.5 feet below ground. There are 8 infiltration basins, 1 infiltration swale, and a set of subsurface infiltration chambers on the site. In order for them to function properly, they must be above the water table. Otherwise, there will be, at best, no infiltrate, and at worst, be a conduit to continuously convert groundwater to surface water at an unknown rate or volume. The basement floors are proposed as deep as 7 feet below existing ground. This is extremely problematic as sump pumps are not a reliable solution. And in the lot sizes, sump pump discharges would be too near to other homes. Discharge from sump pumps cannot be discharged into the drainage systems as quantities are indeterminate and would interfere with the infiltration system functioning as designed. There are sewer mains as deep as 22 feet below existing ground and drain lines as deep as 11 feet below ground. This will pose problems for construction given the need for shoring and dewatering. In addition to the potential problems with construction and effects on the functionality of the drainage system, if these basins are in the water table, there will always be standing water in them. This could provide breeding areas for mosquitoes. The Stormwater Management Handbook requires 1 soil sample for every 5,000 square feet of basin bottom, with a minimum of 3 samples for each infiltration basin. Not every basin has a required number of test pits. There are several instances where the time of concentration, TC in parentheses, in the pre-development condition and the post-development condition may not be representative of the longest hydraulic flow. Time of concentration is determined in TR-55, in parentheses USDA, technical release 55, as the time it takes for the runoff to travel to a point of interest from the hydraulically most distant point. The sheet flow for PDA 3 is 12 minutes, but the flow path of the sheet could also have been used for EDA 3TC, which has 9.1 minutes from the flow sheet, as the flow path, ground cover, and slopes did not change from pre to post development. Same for EDA 2 and PDA 9, and EDA 3 and PDA 7. Although the flow path shows it may be longer linear distance, it may be that the hydraulic time is shorter. These should be reevaluated. The existing drain line in forestry should be evaluated. In the pre-development 100-year storm event, the calculations indicate that 1,000 gallons per second, in parentheses 127 feet squared per second, are entering Forest Street by overland flow. Post-development, the flow is approximately the same, but some of the flow will be piped into the system. What are the sizes and slopes of the pipes in Forest Street? A 40% void volume for the subsurface chambers may be aggressive. Please provide supporting documentation. The Board of Health is recommending that the planning board require the following items. A, soil borings be performed at all of the locations of the infiltration basins, infiltration swale, and infiltration chamber bed, even those that have the minimum required by the Stormwater Handbook. B, soil borings be performed every 300 feet along the entire proposed roadway. C, a soil boring at the location of the proposed homes for design of foundations and roof infiltration systems. D, every basement floor must be above the actual water table. E, all soil testing should be performed in the presence of the Board of Health agent. F, the infiltration systems will require groundwater mounting analysis. Only 1 groundwater mounting analysis was completed, but is required for all systems with a vertical separation from the bottom of the exfiltration system to the seasonal high groundwater of less than 4 feet in the recharge system attenuates the peak discharge from the 100-year storm, which appears to be all of them. Because there are so many infiltration systems in close proximity to each other on the site, 8 basins, 1 swale, 1 bed, 186 roof. The analysis should should include, a distance component of the influence, as the mount under one system may also interact with the mount under another system. The analysis needs to be evaluated for a length of time at least equal to the amount of time the basin will be holding water, in parentheses, not just the 24 hours of the storm. At this time, I do not believe this project meets DEP stormwater management standards or the Dayton stormwater bylaw. The groundwater is a serious issue, and we need to protect the residents of the new homes, the town wetlands, and the town's existing stormwater infrastructure. It is imperative that the entire project concept, including houses, driveways, streets, drainage systems, and sewer systems, incorporate best management practices in order to protect public health. This letter is not intended to be a comprehensive review of the project's drainage calculations or stormwater checklist. A third-party engineering review should be conducted of the drainage calculations and supporting documents to determine if the project complies with Mass DEP stormwater management. Thank you, Todd M. Pilling, PE, Board of Health, Stormwater Agent. I also want to read another. This is an email into record, and this is from our conservation agent, Mrs. Lisa Caledonia, to our office manager, Kerry Easterday, the subject of Forest Hills, continued public hearing, and this was dated on Tuesday, February 8th, 2022. Good morning. This email is to inform you that the Conservation Commission is reviewing this project concurrently with the Planning Board. We have retained an outside consultant, parentheses Beta Group, to review the project to ensure WPA performance standards and stormwater performance standards are met. I will refrain from submitting comments on this project until our consultants have completed the review. Thanks, Lisa S. Caledonia, Conservation Agent, Town of Dayton, 979 Somerset Avenue, Dayton, Mass. 02715. The phone number is 508-669-6431, and it is extension 119. This is another email that I'd like to read into record. And this is from Tom Billing, and this is also received on Tuesday, February 8th. Carry here with the Board of Health comments. It appears the amount of disturbance on the site, including building demolition, pavement removal, landscaping, and pavement overlay, may exceed 35,000 square feet. As such, a stormwater permit from the Stormwater Committee would be required. Given this redevelopment, the Stormwater Committee would need to see that there is an improvement to the quality of the runoff from the site. The locations of existing drainage structures and their discharges should be indicated on the site plans. We recommend that the site engineer contact the Dayton Stormwater Agent to discuss potential mitigation measures. Marijuana permit or permits will be required from the Board of Health for site and/or sales of a marijuana facility. Many of the existing contour labels are too small to be legible. And that's from Todd M. Pilling, and that was the Dayton Board of Health, 1111 Somerset Avenue, Dayton, Mass. 02715.
Is there a comment about?
I don't think that pertains to this.
Yeah, that doesn't pertain. I don't know why that was in there, but that doesn't pertain to this.
Development committee?
That's a pure release system.
Yeah, it's just a comment that should not have been included with that. At this time, we're going to read another letter in the record, and this is from David and Karen O'Connor, the Dayton residents, located at 237 Forest Street, North Dayton, Mass. 02764. I will refrain from giving the phone number to the public. And this is in regards to the public hearing for Forest Hills Estates. And this is public input, Forest Hills Estates, March 16, 2022, public input. To the members of the Dayton Planning Board, third submission. We are vehemently opposed to the proposed development by DI Trust, which will make our home a T-intersection / corner lot and put a bullseye on our home and endanger our property from traffic entering and exiting the road proposed across the street from 237 Forest Street. It will make our home less desirable and devalue our real estate value and cause irreparable harm to us and create in perpetuity a nuisance for our property. We have the right to enjoy our property peacefully, which we have since we moved here in 1992. There has never been a road across the street, always a home. There never has been headlights beaming in our living room, kitchen, and bedroom for cars and trucks, which there will be if the proposal goes through, The The proposed road straightaway is 431 feet at a 10 to 20 degree declining slope towards our house. At 10 miles per hour, each car lights will be illuminating our house. A vehicle is a potential missile which could end up in our yard or in our house if a road is across the street from our house, changing it to a T-corner lot. DI Trust purchased the house across the street in November of 1994 from Linda Beers Hobson. We were there in January of 1992. In parentheses, we were there first with no access road via 236 Forest Street proposed. In parentheses, 236 Forest Street is a residential / agricultural lot, not a road. Allowing this proposed development will allow a road on that lot. This will negatively impact our residents. Our elected boards are elected for a reason, to protect the rights of the town residents. I'd like to thank Mr. and Mrs. David and Karen O'Connor for their letter for the record. I'm going to read a communication in the record from the Town of Dayton Building Commissioner. This is dated March 15th of 2022. Honorable members of the planning board, this co-authored letter has been written to initiate discussions on questions related to the proposed development known as Forest Hills. The building and fire department understand that this subdivision is said to be comprised of single-family dwellings arranged in a clustered pattern and located on 135 households. The roadways will become public and eventually be maintained by the town of Dayton. Municipal water and sewer services are depicted on the proposed plans. Firefighting and infrastructure has not yet been vetted. There are a few questions related to public safety and permitting that need to be addressed as part of this public hearing process. Will there be public or private water and sewer services? The building code mandates access to both potable and sanitary sewer. Is there adequate water to service the proposed buildings and firefighting infrastructure? Have hydrostatic calculations been performed from the proposed water source supporting an adequate water supply? Cluster developments exacerbate the need for an appropriate water source. Do all the roads in the proposed subdivision meet the requirements of the NFPA standards, which is the National Fire Protection Association standards? Some of the roadways appear to be very narrow and may not meet minimum subdivision standards pursuant to the town bylaws. What type of common buildings are there proposed? A community center or other related assembly-type building may require the installation of a sprinkler system. These items are joint concerns of the fire chief and building commissioner. We look forward to your responses on these important matters. Respectfully, James D. Aguilar Jr., building commissioner, Chief Chris McGee, chief of the fire department, town of Dayton. Gentlemen, in regards to this communication that was presented to us today from our building commissioner, please reach out to Mrs. Easterday. If you have any comments, we will not hear them this evening. Please put them in writing, and they will be discussed if and when this public hearing is continued. Thank you, gentlemen. So at this time, I'm going to open the floor up to public input. The board has decided that we will allow each resident 3 minutes to speak. I have made the determination that if the subject matter continues to be the same from every resident, I'm going to ask people to move along and please give us something different that has not been said already. So again, if the first 5 speakers get up and say basically the same narrative, my point is just please ask everyone to continue with something different. But of course, I am going to give everyone the opportunity to speak, as you would do the same for me if I were in your position. So with that, I'm going to open the floor up. Is there a representative who is representing the residents of the Forest Hills area? Is there anyone?
I'll speak.
If you would, please come up to the podium. Please identify yourself by your name and your home address, please.
Doug White at Forest Street, 455. Vehemently opposed to it for a lot of the reasons that were just stated in the letters that were entered into the record. I think that it's way too many houses on way too small lots. It's going to be totally too congested. You've got police concerns, firefighter concerns, water department concerns. The existing homes on Forest Street are going to be negatively impacted. I sat in on a meeting at the North Dayton Fire District, and they gave a lot of guidelines that have to be followed through on, and I haven't seen any of those presented as far as how we're going to keep our water pressure, which could be a potential fire hazard if there was a fire on that street and you didn't have the proper water pressure to fight the fire. It's just not in the best interest of the town or of the neighborhood up on the Forest Street area to have this type of a subdivision. I know that it's called a conservation subdivision, which makes it sound like there's something going on in the way of conservation, but it's really just a loophole to be able to build houses on smaller lots. In our town, you're supposed to have a 250-foot frontage if you have a septic system, 200-foot frontage if you have town water. These houses are all going to be 7,500 square foot lots, which means my lot, which is just under an acre, you're going to have probably 4 houses on the same lot that my house sits on, which is going to mean there's going to be parking in the streets. It's just not in the best interest of the town. It's not in the best interest of the residents of the town, and it's going to negatively impact the people who already live there.
Thank you, Mr. White. Anyone else, please raise your hand. Young lady. If you would, please identify yourself and name and address.
My name's Taylor Dodenhoff, 441 Forest Street. Along the same lines as Doug, vehemently oppose the proposition. I'll choose to focus on traffic. Forest Street has already in the last few decades become an extreme cut-through route for people getting to and from Route 44. I have been living in the area for 27 years and have seen how immense the traffic has become, people speeding down the road, and just the idea of how many vehicles there would be if 135 homes were put in between, 2 to 4 plus people, a family, friends coming over, anything like that. I just cannot fathom what that roadway would turn into. Like, it's already essentially a congested speedway where trucks are going through and cars are going through, and now how are we going to meet, as in terms of disrupting the other residents that live on the street? We're already so disrupted as it is. How can we add that many more vehicles going up and down the roadway? Trying to think if there's anything else I can say without repeating. Essentially, I think it's very negative for the town to accept the proposition on basis of conservation, like Doug mentioned. There's so much flora and fauna that are out in that area. That space could be used if we were to purchase it ourselves, if people were to somehow raise the money to have us purchase it. That could be used for parks, it could be used for hiking trails, it could be used for anything, rather than just destroying more land that's been undisturbed for a long time and displacing all the wildlife. So I just think overall it's very negative and not something that a right to farm community should accept. That's all.
Thank you very much. Mr. Marvell? I'm sorry, Mr. Meyer, I didn't get you. Again, name and address, please, for the record.
Hi, Dave Marble, 102 Forest Street. I lived on Forest Street probably for over 30 years, and I agree, there's a lot of traffic going on. We have a lot of people speeding down that road right now. We don't even have a speed sign posted yet on Forest Street. The other concern I have is if you got, just say 100 houses, you got 2 kids per house, there's 200 more students coming into to Dayton, and right now we're trying to figure out how to pay for BP. We have a problem with our high school. We still have trailers. It's gotta stop, we gotta take a break and see what we have right now before we keep building on. It's just not there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marvell. Mrs. Devine?
No, my point was made, I want to be redundant.
Anyone else on the floor that'd like to come up and make a statement? Any public input? Anyone? Mrs. Devine? If you again, please identify yourself and your name and address.
Joseph Demarkin, 126 Forest Street. I request that the new development meet the town regulations regarding lot size and frontage, just as the existing houses on Forest Street obey those same regulations. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Any members of the public who'd like to speak? Gentlemen of the board, any statements that you'd like to make? Anyone at this time? What did you, Mrs. Mike?
I'm sorry, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Which I
if
could
you-
be asked to both. Heidi Tamarkin, 126 Forest Street. And the question is, at the last meeting that we attended back in the fall, and we were talking about putting in place a lot of these different essays and different studies that were going to be done. And I was wondering if there's an end date. We hear a lot of informal talks have taken place and all of this, and that's fine and dandy, but I think a lot of us would like to see where we actually stand and in what time frame are we looking at. I know that some of the water runoff and sewage, we simply have to wait for the season to be appropriate and all, but in general, I mean, we are also vehemently opposed to this, but we'd like to see at least some answers instead of continuously spinning our wheels. Is there a time frame by which to say the fire department by such and such a date will be presenting their analysis open for the public's viewing, et cetera, et cetera? So it's kind of just a question on where from here, what do we look forward to as next steps?
I absolutely understand. We ourselves, the planning board, are waiting for our peer review engineers to come back with us with more information. So what happens is that, just as an example this evening, is that plan revisions are made, that information will be sent to our peer reviews, they will review it, send back their comments, we in turn go back to the applicants, and then the process still continues. So there is really, I should not say it this way, but there is really no end date to the processes we go through. It's just a question of the time frames that they're really not set, but how fast they can get the information back to us so that we can act ourselves. Now, we don't want to rush this in any way, shape, or form to say, to give a hypothetical that we approve this evening with, with 55 different conditions. And then we get 6 months into the construction phase, and then we find out that we would neglect on certain items and issues. So we don't, we're here to work, do our due diligence also as a planning board, because we are all residents of town, just as you are.
It's appreciated.
I've born and raised in town. I've seen the town grow exponentially in 30 years. This town was born 30 years ago by urban sprawl. Never prepared for it. I will say that, being a resident all my life. Never prepared for it. That goes back to many boards of selectmen. The issue was here. They were told, again, school issues are out of our hands. That again is a situation where renovations were done at the high school in the 90s. I worked there. They were told 1 week after the renovations were done, you better get a school study building committee together because you're going to be busted at the seams because of urban sprawl, so that type of thing. So we were unprepared. So we as a board want to be as prepared as we can to make sure that the residents are informed as well as we're going to be informed. So again, this is going to be a continuous process. The information provided to us is going to go to our peer review engineers. They're going to make sure that we get any updated materials. Mr. Glass and his attorneys, their engineers, they'll be back in front of us, I'm sure, numerous times before this is all settled. So,
Just what I wanted to
yeah.
hear. Thank you.
Time frame, I just couldn't, I'm sorry to be long-winded, but I just couldn't give the time frame, so. Do we have any questions of anyone from the public, again, for the applicants this evening? I have a representative here this evening. She's our chairman of the Stormwater Committee. I do have the distinct honor of serving alongside this woman and many others that are on that board. And again, the Stormwater Committee is a separate issue from what we're doing here. But as that committee, we are also looking out for the best interests of the residents of the town of Dayton. So I just want that to be said. Any members have any questions before I do turn it over to Mr. Talman, if you'd like to make a statement?
I do.
Mr. Frigavero?
As a rule of thumb, normally before a conservation subdivision is proposed to us, as a rule of thumb, we request that they show us the amount of houses that they could fit in as a conventional subdivision. And so far, we have not seen that, and I would like to see if somebody could give an explanation to everyone here as to why that's not the case. Yes.
Yeah. Excuse me, that is a good question. And the question that Mr. Figueroa poses is that we've not been presented with a yield plan yet.
We've asked, the first meeting that they came before us, I actually brought that up, and I asked that that be submitted to us prior to, and I want to hear what you have to say.
Sure. My remarks on that are somewhat limited. We provided a fairly extensive response to that in writing. And I think at this point, what would be most fair to the process, given the importance of compliance with the settlement agreement, is getting a written response to the fairly detailed position that we laid out in the letter.
Do you have a copy of that letter? Maybe you could read it so everybody will have it.
It's 20 pages long if you'd like me to read it. It's available, it is available online. I'm happy to read whatever section the board would like, but it is available online.
It's in the packet. Board members, any other questions? Mr. Glass and his attorney? Attorney Talman?
Sure. So let me see if I can help round out that issue rather than just having people refer to their papers, because I think the public will benefit as well as the board. I've been pretty consistent on this. Neither Attorney Glass nor myself were around when this settlement agreement was negotiated. It is a curious document, to say the least. But what the settlement agreement resolved was a dispute over a subdivision. There was never a special permit application. As the board is aware, if someone wants to do a conservation subdivision, you need both subdivision approval as well as a special permit. There was never an application for a special permit, so that issue was never resolved. Somehow, during the course of the negotiation of the settlement agreement, the parties seem to have agreed what the number of units would be for the yield plan and what the number of units would be for the conservation subdivision. Now, I don't have any quarrel with that particular agreement. It is very curious that they did that, and there is no paper trail, and both Josh and I have looked for one to see how that happened or why that happened. Terry's looked as well, and there is just no record of how they got from point A to point B. However, it happened, and they agreed to a number of units, but that's not where the story ends with respect to the yield plan, because a yield plan isn't just for the purpose of determining the number of units, which appears to have been bargained away, or the number of lots. A yield plan is also really essential for the ultimate question under the conservation subdivision bylaw, which says under 4380 that the planning board may approve, approve with conditions, or deny an application for a conservation subdivision after assessing the conservation subdivision, whether the conservation subdivision better promotes the objectives herein than would orthodox development. So my point has been that we're not here to fight over what that yield plan would be, although I think in normal circumstances that could be an issue that the board could dispute. I'm not quarreling that the number of lots was bargained away. But what I would state, and I've stated this for months and months and months, is that you need to see the yield plan so that you can answer that ultimate question under the special permit. You never bargained away, nor could you, as a matter of law, the jurisdiction that you have for a special permit, because no special permit had ever been applied for. The courts only resolved, and the settlement agreement only resolved the subdivision approval. So you still have to determine whether or not you will issue a special permit. And that is the ultimate question under 4380, and that's why I've stated from the beginning that a yield plan is required. In addition to that, the yield plan would be helpful to allow you to assess the general special permit criteria, which also apply under section 5300 of your bylaw. And under 5321 through 26, there are 6 different discrete areas, which I think Greenman tried to get into a little bit in their responses, that you are going to have to analyze, ranging from impacts to social, economic, and community needs, traffic flow and safety, adequacy of utilities and other public services, obviously including water, neighborhood character, which has come up, impacts to the natural environment, which came up, potential fiscal impact, which has been raised a number of times with respect to school impacts and otherwise. The yield plan, while tangential a little bit to that, will still help inform that. But more than that, all of those things are on the table because no one's ever applied for a special permit. The settlement agreement doesn't say that a special permit is to issue. It's only to say that a subdivision approval could be forthcoming, but not the special permit. Now, at the end of the day, assuming the applicant, through their various talks with water and stormwater and your peer review engineer and the Board of Health, demonstrates that this project can satisfactorily address all those issues, and you get a yield plan that allows you to choose if it's better than what they're presenting, then they may have an approval. But we have to go through that process, and I think this board is ready to be open-minded to that process. But constantly stating that, well, the settlement agreement says we don't have to do that, isn't particularly helpful. And in fairness to the applicant, they have both stated that the settlement agreement is what it is, which I disagree with in some part, and then gone on to say that they're going to go through the process of going and getting some review. They are talking to Stormwater, they are talking to the fire department, and I credit that at face value. But I want to state clearly that this board has not bargained away any of the special permit criteria. Again, with the exception of the number of lots that would get approved here, which I believe, in fairness to the applicant, has been bargained away. I don't know how or why that happened, but it did happen. So that's, I don't know if the board has any follow-up questions for me on that. Josh and I have been around and around on this. We may never agree on it, but that's been my position from the beginning. Happy to continue to have those discussions. I know they're a new council. Happy to have that discussion with them too.
Gentlemen, any questions of Attorney Solomon?
I'll limit my comments on this because I think it's highly unlikely Attorney Tallerman and I will come to any consensus during the course of this meeting. But I think given the response that we provided, you know where we stand on most of those positions. One factual difference in opinion that I want to share is I don't believe that there's a lack of data and a paper trail here given the original application that led to an appeal and subsequent settlement. I think that that process that took place prior to execution of the settlement agreement is highly relevant to the determinations that were made and settled via the settlement agreement and that govern the decision before you today. Well, not before you today, but as part of this process.
I agree with you. There is a somewhat of a paper trail, which includes, and I think you'd have to concede this, a lack of a special permit application. What I'm referring to is that was hard for Josh or I to pinpoint exactly how they arrived at the number of units. We know that there were negotiations. Neither of us have the records of those negotiations. I asked the town's prior special counsel as to their record keeping on that, and I didn't come up with much, and I think Josh has tried to get Attorney Hanyon's files as well, and I don't think that has produced at least any information, and I'm not asking you to share confidential items on that particular issue regarding the yield plan. But even absent the yield plan issue, we still have a clear and incontrovertible fact that there's never been a special permit application. So. But they're working, I'm not, again, I want to be clear that they haven't drawn a line in the sand and saying they're not going to provide more information. We heard Outback talking about their ongoing processes here. And I think our hope is that they go through that and we complete this special permit process. The subdivision process is more abbreviated.
Mr. Glass, I just have, just my own question. I'd like to go through with the Stormwater Committee to do a walkthrough. First off, has the wetlands been fully delineated up there yet?
Yes, I believe they have. I'll let Jason, I believe they have been, yes.
Second question is there easy access to get in there, walking access? Because, we're in, it's early spring, it's gonna be awfully wet. There's probably brush and briars, so is there gonna be like clear areas that we can go through and I'll walk through at that time?
So my response to that is twofold. We would ask that the members of the public not generally walk through the property.
No,
Just so it's the we in this equation, I think, is generally town representatives. So that being said, yes, there is a path that was created by the excavator that did the very large number of test pits. And currently, Outback is staking the roadways because Beta, the review engineer for the Conservation Commission, has requested that be done. There is going to be a site walk with Beta coming up in the near future. Mr. Pilling has been invited to join us for when that gets scheduled. Happy to invite any members of the board to join as well. My only comment would be whether you want a separate site walk, which we'd be happy to do, because Beta essentially was having their own site walk. We asked if we could go, someone else asked if they could go, and it may be taking on a little more than they originally anticipated, but that doesn't mean we wouldn't be happy to host a site walk at the convenience of all members of the planning board, frankly.
Understood. The same parameters would apply if the Stormwater Committee were to come out. If there's a composition that has a quorum, then we would have to post a meeting. I believe that our esteemed chairwoman would prefer not to have that happen, and the information could be relayed as such from whoever the members are down at that meeting. Same goes for us. If 3 out of 5 show up, then we have to post a meeting. And,
which is also fine.
And then what happens also with that is that even though you are there as a composition, you still have the parameters where you cannot deliberate. So I could not talk to Mr. Wood, said he's handling, Mr. Cavallo was there with us. We couldn't sit here in a conversation and be able to speak about the situation, with anything that's going on in that property. And the same would apply to the Stormwater Committee. If there were a quorum present, members will not deliberate between each other. We will ask questions of the applicant, and it remains as such. It will not go any further than that.
We're happy to accommodate whatever would help the board, visualize, walk, see, feel the property, if that would be helpful, and whatever form that may need to be.
Thank you. I don't want to end this meeting quite yet. Before I do, are there any residents who have any questions of the applicant for this evening, because this will be an ongoing process? Mr. White.
I have one. So, Doug White, 455 Forest Street. So that was enlightening. I thank the attorney for going through that about the permitting process and then the special permitting process. And my question is, why aren't we just going for a regular permit that's in the best interest of the town, which is like lots that are already in the town?
We're happy to accommodate whatever would help the board, visualize, walk, see, feel the property, if that would be helpful, and whatever form that may need to be.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't want to end this meeting quite yet. Before I do, are there any residents who have any questions of the applicant for this evening?
I don't want to end this meeting quite yet. Before I do, are there any residents who have any questions of the applicant for this evening, because this will be an ongoing process? Mr. White.
So,
And since we don't have a permit to do a conservation subdivision, and there's not been a permit pulled to do a regular subdivision yet, which is the precursor, right? Isn't that the precursor, to have a regular, whatever conforms to the town's bylaws
Yes.
for building? Why aren't we doing that? Because I've talked to some other people, and if that's what you were building, none of us would be here fighting it right now, or being opposed to it. And we could have a, instead of an adversarial working relationship, we could have a, we would look at this as a benefit to our town. That's my question.
Well, I prefer, Mr. White, not to directly.
Oh, I thought this was for asking questions, okay.
Of the application,
Okay.
just refer it to the board, and then we'll just refer it back to you.
Okay, do it that way. Thanks.
Just procedure, that's all. If you would, if you'd like to respond to that, Mr. Glass, anyone representing?
I'll keep my response brief because it speaks to a number of issues. Suffice to say that along the vein of Attorney Tallerman and I probably having a difference of opinion on substantive portions of this project, I would state that the question probably is a little bit related more to the opinion of Attorney Tallerman. Well, that's not even a fair statement. Candidly, it's a slightly different perspective on where we are in the process. There was an original application that went in, there was an appeal, and there was a settlement resulting in the conservation subdivision that we're here to implement today. So there was a prior process. It actually began in 1996, and that's why we're before you with the project that we're here before you on today.
Thank you. Mr. Derby, if you would please, name and address.
Bob Derry, 207 Forest Street. I've hunted the area in question for the last 50 years, and I'm very interested in the delineation of the wetlands. And what time of the year is these studies taking place? Because it changes radically out there from one season to the next. If there's going to be a walkthrough, I think people should be allowed to go through the walkthrough out there. You know, and what time? Is it going to be a dry time? Yeah, I bet you it will be. You know, and I want to get the $200 shoes messed up. But that place changes. That place changes a lot in the course of the seasons. So I just think that should be open to debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Derby. Anyone else from the public like to speak this evening? With that, members of the board, I'm going to entertain a motion to continue the public hearing once we have dated there. Gentlemen, before I continue the public hearing, when are you available to have council refer back without council, and also to?
Yeah, I'm not worried about the council conversation. It's more about the peer review back and forth. There are other technical issues. It's when they feel comfortable, they can come with a full packet of info for you all.
How much time do you think you're going to need, Mr. Glass?
Candidly, I'm not sure. We haven't received the comments. What I would, if it's okay with the board, I would suggest that once we receive those comments, I'll confer with Mr. Youngquist and Attorney Brennan, and maybe suggest, look at the calendar and suggest.
We have to give a definitive date now.
Oh.
We could continue that.
Oh, that's okay. That's fine.
But if you wanted to go, if you felt that 60 was better than 30, so we're not inconveniencing the public, then that's between you and your team.
I'd rather not go a full 60 because I'm hoping we'll get comments from Green International, sooner rather than later. So the next meeting would be, sorry for doing this on the public record, but I'll just pull the calendar if that's okay. I think your next meeting would be on the 6th and then the 20th, correct?
Correct.
I would suggest that the most appropriate date might be the first meeting in May 4th. on the assumption that we would receive comments from Green International in the next, hopefully, week or two.
That's 6 weeks. I think
Six
there
weeks.
should be sufficient enough time, I would think, for Green International to come back with comments.
Oh, if I'm seeing Carrie down her head.
I'm not available, I have to attend a town meeting that night. It would be great if there were no legal issues here, but the board seems to, would like me to be here, so the 4th doesn't work for me. And then the board is meeting on the 18th, though? Would that be their next one after that, or?
Would it be possible, and I don't mean to overstep, to pick another date that week or the following week? The 18th is pretty far out, but I understand that that's when you probably all have your life scheduled to attend the meeting, so maybe that the 18th is the only possible date.
To the board, I mean, I'm available Wednesday the 11th right now, and Wednesday the 18th.
Servers on the 1st and 3rd of the month. Yeah, the 18th would be best, I think would best suit the board. And best suit our attorney also. So you're amenable to the 18th?
Yeah.
The applicant amenable to the 18th?
Absolutely.
Before we, I go any further, I do have, Mrs. Goulart would like to say a few words. She is the chairwoman of the Town Dayton Stormwater Committee. Mrs. Goulart, if you would, please.
Nancy Goulart, Chair of the Dayton Stormwater Committee. Before you make a decision on this date, this project has been continued until May the 2nd with the Town Conservation Commission. I don't know if they're planning to get another extension or when they're going to have the information, but that's an important date for the Town of Dayton Stormwater Committee because we attend those because the present plans show a basin in the city of Taunton, and when we left the meeting this month on another issue, we had told the Town Conservation Commission we would be attending future meetings where this is coming up because at that point in time we had not seen any plans. We still haven't seen any plans. Obviously everyone's waiting for comments. That meeting was March the 7th. So from a planning point, the Stormwater Committee would like to know if they are going to ask Concom for another extension beyond the 2nd of May, because it appears everyone's waiting for the same information.
Right, that was mentioned at today's Stormwater Committee meeting, and I'm sorry that I neglected it. It was on my calendar. I was going to bring that up. Yes, that could throw a monkey wrench into this a little bit because, again, we don't know if Concom is going to have their peer review engineer information back, or they're going to meet and vote for approval that evening. So again, there could be a continuance from possibly the applicant, and Concom may not be ready themselves.
Obviously, the Town Conservation Commission wants to hear from the Dayton Stormwater Committee on this issue.
You want to put it further out?
I actually think we should stay the course with this date, and I think Mr. Glass has been pretty honest with us that when he's not ready, he's asked for continuances, and if he needs one at the time, I'm sure he'll ask for one. But I think it's good for us to have that date in our pocket.
Attorney Glass, you're amenable to the 18th of May?
Yes, we are.
Attorney Talman is?
Yeah.
So, gentlemen of the board, I'm going to entertain a motion to continue the public hearing for Forest Hills Special Permit Conservation Subdivision, map 3, lot 28, 33, and 78, until May 18th at 6 p.m. at the Dayton Middle School, 1250R, Somerset Avenue, Dayton, Mass.
So moved.
Motion has been made, and there has been a second. Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, let's vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, that motion carries. I'd like to thank the public for coming out this evening.
Mr. Chairman, may I just add one thing? For the benefit of the public that's here, For those of you who are not familiar with the Stormwater Committee, it's a subcommittee of the Board of Health. It is made up of representatives from all of the major departments. Mr. Ryan's mentioned he sits on the committee as chairman of the planning board. I represent the Board of Selectmen. We have a representative from the Board of Health, that could be Mr. Pius or Mrs. Catavia. It's the building commissioner, Mr. Aguirre. It's the highway superintendent, Mr. Ferry. It's Mr. Pilling, the stormwater agent, and Mr. Burnett from the Conservation Commission. So all of the major commissions and our planning board, our other boards in town are represented on the committee. In addition, we have Mrs. Lisa Caldonia, who is the agent for the Conservation Commission, and also both Chief McGee and Chief McDonald, depending upon what issues arise that may involve public safety. So all of us work together on stormwater issues, and all of the issues that we deal with are covered in the current Town of Dayton stormwater bylaw and regulations. And whatever work we do is reported back to the various committees or individuals who have to issue permits. So rest assured that our committee is thorough, and we have specific guidelines that have to be followed. And those guidelines and bylaw have all been approved, not only at town meeting, but have also been passed muster with the EPA and the DEP, who both recognize the Dayton Stormwater Committee as the official contact for everything stormwater. So thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Dwight. I'd like to personally thank the representatives from the town of Dayton who came this evening representing those boards and committees. I'd like to also take this time to thank the members of the public who came out and expressed your concerns in regards to this potential subdivision. And again, just a reminder, the next meeting continued will be on May 18th at 6 p.m. It'll be here. And again, the general public is more than welcome. The same parameters will apply. We're going to be probably going to ask the members to adjourn no later than 9 p.m. and then take public input from each individual for 3 minutes. Mr. Glass will be here with his representatives again, and Mr. Talman will also be here. So again, I'd like to thank everyone for coming out this evening. With that, members of the board, I'm going to entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes of March 2nd of 2022.
So moved.
Motion is made and seconded. Any further discussion on the meeting minutes? Hearing none, let's vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? That motion carries. Mrs. Lisa, do you have any correspondence for this month? Do we have any public input before we adjourn this evening? Hearing none. Gentlemen of the board, I'm going to entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion made by Mr. Cooney and seconded by Mr. Woods. Vice Chairman Woods. Any further discussion on the motion to adjourn? Hearing none, let's vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That motion carries. Thank you, Town of Dayton. Thank you very much, Cable.